Hi everyone, it's Jen here and welcome to Jen's World About Art. So today I'm going to do a fan art painting of my absolutely favourite game character of all time. His name's Arthur Morgan and he's from the game Red Dead Redemption 2, and I love that game and I played it from start to finish and I cried at the end and it was absolutely brilliant. If anyone plays games who watches this video, play Red Dead Redemption 2, the best game ever. Anyway, so I've been wanting to paint this character for so long. I played this character in the game. And so I did a basic outline and then I added the skin tones with transparent, Venetian red and, transparent pyrrole orange. And then I also, like on his hat, I used Payne's Grey, just very, very diluted. On his shirt, I used ultramarine blue in varying tones as I build up the layers. So I've done a very thin layer of Payne's Grey on his hat to begin with, and then I start to build up in the shadow areas, going darker and darker, and it just gives that three-dimensional look everywhere you want it. So yeah, I've got dark around the rim of his hat, dark around the back of his hat. I start to build up the top of his hat at the front, and I go over that completely white area. I want that to be a highlight, but I didn't want it to be a pure white highlight. So now you can see I'm starting to build up all the tones and I add darker in the areas sort of that are underneath in complete shadow under his hat. So now I go in with a slightly stronger skin tone of Venetian red and transparent pyrrole orange, and I just start to build up the layers bit by bit. Every layer I get a fraction darker. For his hair, I used burnt umber and I added a little bit of ultramarine blue just to brown it off. And I added ultramarine blue to his eyes, which I will darken up. I just popped that on just so I could see where his pupils were looking, or his irises were looking. So as you can see, I'm adding another layer. So exactly the same pigments as before, just slightly less water, more pigment, and even darker again. I'm going to add a little bit of the same hair colour around where his mustache and beard are. It's a very, very sort of thin beard. It's just like he's had 5 days of not shaving, so it's not quite a beard, but it's not quite stubble anymore. So I pop the shadows in where I want the beard to be, and I splattered my painting, so I wiped that off really quickly. So now I've used ultramarine blue and I added a touch of indigo just to darken that up, to pop the patterns on the stripes on his shirt. And I start to build up the shadow areas around his shirt with that. So yeah, that's ultramarine with a touch of indigo. And I add where the creases are and the different stripes are. And I'll work my way around the painting. So he's wearing a scarf under his, like a bandana-y kind of scarf under his shirt. So I pop that in just with pure Payne's Grey quite thickly. I add a little bit of indigo now into his eyes, just around the edge of his irises and right into the pupil. So that's just indigo to create that dark blue effect. And now I start to build the hair texture, and I go in again with burnt umber, but I also add a little bit of Van Dyke brown to it, and I take that around. Now I start to define his stubble and around where the hair will be on his face. So you can see I just do tiny little brush strokes in the direction of his beard or his stubble, and I take that around his mustache and around his chin, and I add darker purpley tones to the under areas where it's shadowed, where it's in full shadow, like directly under his chin, directly under his hat. So I've used indigo with a little touch of Venetian red to make that purple tone. And I start to darken up areas under his nose. And now I go in with his lips, and I use pure Venetian red for that. I just mark that in and around the edges of his eyes and his cheeks and anywhere that's in the shadow areas. So now I go in, his hat had paled off, it had dried quite pale, so I've gone in to add another layer onto his hat because it needed another layer of indigo, not indigo, Payne's Grey, to darken that up onto his hat. I define around his eyes, and I used a bit of sepia around his eyes, actually, a bit of dark sepia. I add a little bit more dark skin tone around his hat and onto his face, and then because it's sort of pretty much the same colour as leather, so he's got leather bands around his hat. So I actually use the skin tone for that, and then I build up a couple of layers on top to make it look like the rope around his hat, or the rope band that he's got there. So now for the background, I wanted something interesting, but I didn't want it too dark and I didn't want just a straight colour. So I used Venetian red with a touch of ultramarine blue, and I created the background. I had it slightly darker behind him and a little bit lighter at the front. So you'll see I've added 2 or 3 layers behind him, and I've gone sort of quite lightly at the front. It just creates interest and focus on his face. It sort of draws you to his face. I add some more defining touches around, he's got like a shoulder thing, and we're just about done. So thank you for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you all for the next video. Okie doke, bye.